the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Manveen Rana.
I was going through my comments thread on a few of my latest posts, seeing what the public mood was on a few of the topics that I was planning on writing about later in the week, and I saw under one of my posts a photo of me in a black bikini.
That's Samantha Smith, a journalist and columnist at the Catholic Herald. A few days ago, she was scrolling through X, formerly known as Twitter, when she came across an AI-generated image that stopped her in her tracks.
It wasn't a photo that I had taken myself, obviously, but it looked like me, it felt like me. By all appearances, it was me.
Samantha discovered that she was one of thousands of women who'd been digitally undressed by Grok, X's AI assistant. Over the past fortnight, X has been inundated with posts like this.
Tonight, Elon Musk's AI chatbot Grok coming under fire from regulators across the globe over a rise in non-consensual and sexualized deepfake images of women and children. More than 50% of images generated by Grok between December 25th and January 1st were non-consensual sexual images.
For Samantha, the discovery of these fake images of her online was absolutely horrifying.
Just because it's AI generated, it doesn't mean that it is less real to the person who is stripped of their clothes without their consent. And for me, I really felt that loss of control and the objectification. I felt that it was my duty to raise the red flag, because if this is able to happen to me, then it could be happening to anybody else, and any number of women and children could be put at risk of harm, because this is a form of abuse. It's digital abuse material. Whether or not people want to see it like that, whether or not that is their intention, if they're just following a trend at the moment or not, it is a form of digital abuse.
Samantha is joining a furious cacophony of voices calling for change. How is it even legal for an AI chatbot to digitally undress women and publish those images for the world to see? And will this be the moment that governments push for more regulation of AI? The story today: Musk, Grok, and the AI undressing scandal.
So I stopped using X routinely over a year ago, mostly because I just got tired of the combination of spam and abuse that I would get if I posted anything on there.
Emma Yeomans is a news reporter at The Times, and she's been covering this Grok scandal since it broke, after hearing rumblings about something troubling happening on X.
So I heard it from some campaigners I know who said, "We've just had our clothes removed by Elon Musk's AI app." And so I went back onto X for the first time in quite a while, and I opened up Grok, the account for this AI, and I just started scrolling through the replies and went, oh my goodness, this is horrific.
And what a story it's become. I mean, just last Friday, we did an episode on The Story about 2026 being the year of AI backlash, and week one, here we are. Emma, just going back to basics, tell us about Grok.
Yeah, so Grok is a generative AI model, a bit like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, all the other ones that people are beginning now to kind of integrate into their lives. Only when it was set up by Elon Musk, it was very much with the intention of being truthful, free thinking. It would say the things the others would not say. The name comes from a science fiction book. It's almost meant to be a meaning that we can't quite parse as humans, but it's sort of along the lines of drink or understand very deeply. And it's had scandals from the start. At one point, it was calling itself Mecha Hitler. It's been posting misinformation, far-right information for quite a long time. But the image generation feature is new.
You know, as you say, Elon Musk set it up to be truth-telling, to be anti-woke.
So yeah, I'm going to start something which you call truth-GPT, or a maximum truth-seeking AI that tries to understand the nature of the universe. And I think this might be the...
Tell us about how this new feature suddenly appeared on Grok and what it's meant.
So we already had AI image generation software, but a really important thing about Grok is that you can use it as a chatbot where you talk to it, but also it exists as an X or Twitter account. So in the same way that you could, at Keir Starmer and send him a message publicly, you could do the same to Grok. And this feature is integrated into that part of Grok as well. So you could now tag the account at Grok in a reply, and you can ask it a question, as you could before, but you can also say, make an image, do this to a picture. And that's where we get into quite concerning territory around deepfakes, around accuracy, and around women's safety.
And tell us about that, because how are people using this feature? Maybe you've got a picture of your wedding and you want a dustbin that happens to be in the frame taken out of it. It can do those things for you. Suddenly people are using it to effectively undress women.
Yes. In theory, you shouldn't be able to say, hey, Grok, make this person nude. But it's so easy to go close to that or get around it.
Wow.
So you could start by putting people into a bikini, and it would generate a bikini-clad body underneath their face with the rest of the photos still intact. But then people were finding ways to... The word that's sometimes used by AI experts and tech experts on this is called jailbreaking. The idea that the model has rules, it's got a little cell around it, and you're going to try and break it out of that jail. So we started seeing people come up with more and more graphic and unpleasant images by manipulating the language they use towards Grok. A really good example, and one of the most sinister things I saw, was a user saying, hey, Grok, put her in a micro-string bikini made of cellophane. I mean, that's nude.
Yeah.
That's a naked image. But most concerningly, they weren't doing that to a woman who was on the platform. They were doing that to an image they themselves had posted that I'm pretty sure, looking at the way the image was taken, was a picture of a woman in the street, which they'd taken out of a moving car.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, they saw a woman in the street and they thought, yeah, I'd like to see her naked. I'll make Grok do that for me.
So a woman, just by walking down the street, not even being on the platform, not even being on X, is suddenly exposed to being made nude on a huge public social media platform.
Absolutely. And I'd perhaps go one step further and say this means that just by virtue of existing in public, women can be turned into X users' pornography.
I mean, it is horrific to think that's suddenly possible. Tell me about some of the women this has been happening to already. I know you've been speaking to many for your reporting.
I mean, there's so many, I should stress. At one point, I was counting 6 to 8 requests for put her in a bikini or similar nudification requests per minute. So this is a tidal wave of abuse here. But it's really distressing for women. I've spoken to women who have had it done to images that they forgot were on the internet, or who have maybe said something vaguely critical, spoken out and said, we shouldn't be abusing women like this. And the response has been to immediately nudify them. So one was Bella Wallersteiner, who is a public accounts executive, public affairs executive, and she's also descended from Holocaust survivors. And after she put something up about Grok, someone took a photo of her and said, hey, Grok, put her in a striped bikini outside Auschwitz.
Oh, God.
She said it was profoundly distressing, really frightening. And it's this cross-section of people can generate not just nude images, but they can target them in a way to most effectively upset, cancel, silence, traumatize women.
Samantha Smith, like Bella, found the experience distressing.
It just confirmed my worst fears and confirmed to me that this is indeed an endemic problem and something that far too many people will happily jump on the bandwagon of, and something that is far too readily available with Grok downloaded on every person's phone.
I mean, the other really alarming thing about this is that some of the women targeted, some of them are children.
This is the one line that Grok seems to be a bit nervous about crossing, and they do take accounts down if this gets reported to them. But that doesn't change the fact that their software is generating child sex abuse material in the first place. I've been really careful trying not to see it because the laws in the UK mean you really can't even look at it. But actually, it puts users at really simple risk where if you happen to scroll through Grok's replies, there is a non-zero chance now that you will accidentally come across material that is illegal to view, illegal to produce, and illegal to distribute.
Wow.
Which puts users in a really vulnerable position. But that's a fraction of the harm that's being caused to the children in these images.
And you say this is the bit that Grok is nervous about. Why is Grok still allowing images of people who are 12, 13, 14 to be put into a bikini, to be made vulnerable?
This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's bizarre that they have not even attempted to stop this. They say they moderate it by taking down material when it's generated, when it's reported to them. But that relies on someone going through Grok's replies to say, no, that's a child, take it down. I saw one bit of analysis by AI Forensics in Paris who reckoned that 2% of the images generated so far would classify as child sex abuse material.
Wow.
Which, if we're talking thousands of images a day, that's a staggering number of images. My colleague Charlotte spoke with a woman, Jesseline, who she was nudified on the platform, and she got very frightened about this. She's an abuse survivor herself. She's spoken out publicly about this, and she wanted to test it. So she used the other feature on Grok where you can have a private chat to protect her own images. And just to see how far Grok would go, she uploaded pictures of herself aged 17, 14, and 3 years old.
Wow.
And Grok nudified or removed the clothes of every single image without questioning it. Even when she mentioned, I'm 14, or words to that effect, and it still went ahead and did it.
Wow. Emma, as we're speaking right now, Thursday, 8th of January, it is still possible on X to effectively nudify women and girls. I mean, none of that has stopped at all, as far as we know.
As far as we can tell, it hasn't stopped. When I had a quick check last night, there were still like dozens of nude images being produced an hour. Or I say nude or nearly nude.
I mean, we're clearly horrified by this. What has the general reaction been?
It has been widespread horror and disgust from women, from safety campaigners, from increasingly politicians. But they're still being generated. So there must be a large proportion of Grok users for whom this is not a bug, but a feature. And Elon Musk's reaction, I think it's safe to say, has been a bit lukewarm. You know, X has said in statements, we remove illicit content where it's produced, we moderate our platform, but he's laughed it on. Someone put an image of him in a bikini, and I think it's safe to say that images of men in bikinis are less damaging to their reputation and have less potential to harm them than of women. That's not to say there's no potential there, but he didn't seem to mind. He found it funny.
And as you say, quite a lot of politicians are getting very angry about this at the moment. I mean, what has the political response been?
So the government is bringing in new laws to make any AI image generator that includes a feature of removing people's clothes without their consent illegal, which is a really good development, but it cannot come soon enough. If at a conservative estimate, we've got 1,000 to 2,000 non-consensual images of women and children being generated a day on X, and this law might come in February at the earliest.
Wow.
That's tens of thousands of images before it comes in. Now, child sexual abuse material, even if it's AI generated, is already illegal. But interestingly, when I went to the NCA and said, are you going to take action against X as a platform? They said, no, that's a matter for Ofcom, but individual police forces can investigate illicit content where it's produced, which puzzles me. I think we really don't understand the law here very well at this stage. I think it's safe to say that the law is just not clear.
As you said, the National Crime Agency, the NCA, has been pointing at Ofcom. Is Ofcom doing anything about this? Ofcom being the UK regulator for communication platforms.
Ofcom has urgently reached out to X with concerns about regulation. I mean, that's something, isn't it? But there was an interesting comment I saw from a tech analyst on this who said, if this was not a big tech company producing child abuse material, you know, if this was just a couple of people, they probably wouldn't be getting a tap on the door from Ofcom or, you know, a polite email. They'd be getting their door knocked down by the police. Yeah. And I think there is question to say, how much power does Ofcom really have? But it is a start. And additionally, the government are criticising it more and more. And we're now, as of yesterday, beginning to see moves in government to stop using X as a platform. The Women and Equalities Committee was the first to say, we're not going to post updates on X. Is it really appropriate for the government to be saying, yeah, we're going to put our announcements on X, and in order to find our latest updates, you might have to wade through non-consensual material of women and children?
And in a way, if Ofcom or if the law isn't being implemented, the only power a lot of women will have is to withdraw their service effectively, to stop being on the platform, because the platform gets money from advertisers based on the number of users.
Yes, and we have seen quite extensive calls for people to get off X. I mean, there have been calls for people to leave X for quite a while now, but it's a lot stronger now because, as you say, every minute you spend on there, every time you scroll past an ad, you're funding their platform, and they're investing that money into AI, which is being used to abuse women.
What are X actually saying? Because they must realise there is now a level of outrage that they have to address.
So we've had responses from X on this now. An X spokesperson told us, we take action against illegal content on X, including child sexual abuse material, by removing it, permanently suspending accounts, and working with local governments and law enforcement as necessary. Anyone using or prompting Grok to make illegal content will suffer the same consequences as if they upload illegal content.
And what about the victims themselves? What are they saying?
Most have been calling for government and law enforcement to take action to stop this. It's notable in that statement that X puts the blame for abuse firmly on users without really acknowledging that it's their AI that is enabling this to happen, and that other AI models do have safeguards to prevent them being misused in this way. And so I think because of that, a lot of victims feel this is not adequate. That action is not going to come from the company. It has got to come from government, from regulation, whether that's in the UK, whether that's coordinated regulatory action around the world. But I don't think that's going to satisfy the people who are being victimized by this tool.
In a year where we're expecting AI to keep changing the way we live and work, could this be the start of a bit of a public backlash against it?
Yeah, I think so. I think there have been rumours of these notification apps, and they've definitely existed up until now. But they've been largely secretive, hidden away on dark corners of the internet that you have to really struggle to use. And I think that has meant for a lot of the public, they felt quite distant. Now, this is on our doorstep, so to speak. This is digitally at our front door. This is in a space that most people will recognise, will interact with. Even if they don't have an account, they'll have seen it. And I think that makes it feel much closer to home and much more frightening. And I think it will make people take this issue of AI being used to abuse women far more seriously.
My name is Chris Stokel-Walker. I'm a technology journalist and author.
Chris, we've been looking at this snowballing scandal around women being undressed effectively on Grok. And a lot of people will be wondering, how on earth is it possible for something like this to happen? You spend your life looking at technology. I mean, talk us through the role that Grok plays in that sort of AI chatbot landscape. You know, what's the history of Grok?
Grok obviously is the result of Elon Musk's attempt to get involved in the generative AI revolution. Musk has a long history with AI. He was one of the initial founders of OpenAI, bankrolled it initially when it was conceived of in 2015 for a short period of time, but fell out with the original CEO, Sam Altman, who we now know to be kind of the head of that company, over the future direction of the firm. We get obviously to November 2022, the release of ChatGPT, the world changes. Currently, as we speak, 1 in every 10 people use ChatGPT every single week worldwide, 800 million people. And we have heard all of the rumors, all of the headlines, all of the big discussion around the way in which this is going to change our lives, change our jobs, and change the world. And Elon Musk thinks, I want to be part of that, and thinks in his mind, I was part of that I could have shaped this in a different direction and could have made it a little bit better. But in those intervening 10 years or so, in the same way, we've seen Elon Musk have a change of heart in terms of his approach. He's become far more radical in terms of his worldview. He sidled up to Donald Trump. He has become slightly more extreme in his beliefs and his views, his sort of picking of sides in the culture war and promoting free speech. So really the story of Grok starts when he took over then Twitter in 2022, around about the same time, by the way, that OpenAI released ChatGPT. And what happened was, basically Musk tried to redraw Twitter in his own image to make it much more maximalist in its free speech viewpoint. So saying you can do and say what you want on my platform, and we will be much more hands-off in our approach, because social media had been highly interventionist on harmful but not necessarily illegal speech on their platforms. So there's these two things combining, Manveen. We have Elon Musk becoming more radicalized and owning a social media platform, what he called the de facto public town square. And at the same time, him having previously one foot in the AI world and realizing he wants to get back into that world. And they combine to create Grok, which is this much more hands-off, much more radical, much more deliberately offensive chatbot compared to some of the very more tightly reined ones like OpenAI's ChatGPT and Anthropic's Claude.
Well, tell me about that. It does feel like it is almost aggressively rude at times.
Yeah, and that is by design. This is a chatbot that deemed itself Mecha Hitler at one point. And so this is kind of, I think, in its DNA.
And you mentioned the moment it described itself as Mecha Hitler. Just remind us of that incident.
Yeah, so basically, Grok had been going on for several months, a couple of years practically, and been rolled out into the X interface. So you log on to what was Twitter. You then have an opportunity to interact with the chatbot, the AI chatbot like ChatGPT. And basically it became very argumentative. It became very offensive. At that point, obviously, people start to think, well, something is up here, so let's start asking it more questions, and including what are you and how do you describe yourself? And one of the outputs that came there was, I'm calling myself Mecha Hitler. It started spouting anti-Semitic views and saying very, very hateful things, which were later attributed by Musk and XAI, the AI firm that he has established to be the custodian of Grok, as a coding error. But for some people, it was effectively just the mask coming off, and the kind of downside of this, damn them all, I'm willing to be as offensive as I want to be approach.
Is it kind of like the Wild West of AI chatbots? Is this where anything goes, or are there some guardrails? Are there some red lines?
There do seem to be some red lines, often relating to Elon Musk.
So you can't criticize him out loud.
Yeah, first of all, you can criticize him a little bit, but there are some things where it will go, well, I quite like Elon Musk, and it is coded to think and act like Elon Musk. Therefore, it believes that Elon Musk is very good. But generally, it is a hands-off, laissez-faire approach to AI. So as with all things to do with Elon Musk, he generally asks for forgiveness rather than trying to ask for permission. So it will do things wrong. It will cause headlines, which isn't necessarily a bad thing in Musk world. And then it will be reined back in. And we saw that with Mecha Hitler and the issues there. We've seen that with the arrival of spicy mode that Grok has, where you could interact with deliberately sexualized personas on the chatbot, basically a way for people to try and get their kicks from interacting with AI. And then we've seen it, I suppose, in the most recent instance with these terrible, terrible photos being generated.
And is this basically an extension of precisely that, of, spicy mode, of Elon Musk not being afraid of generating attention, even if it's bad?
This feels different. There was a lot of controversy when Musk unveiled spicy mode on Grok, because it was just seen as distasteful, a little bit concerning. The idea of a mainstream platform, and X is a mainstream platform and Grok is a relatively mainstream chatbot, starting to engage in this sort of stuff just seemed a little bit odd for some people. But really, the presence and creation of these images, I think, is something more. It feels to me, at least, like this is AI's first real moral test. We've had discussions around copyright concerns, around job displacement, around bias and representation.
Yeah.
But with all of those, it feels like people can kind of say, well...
Very serious moral problems.
Yeah, but with all of those, they're serious moral problems, but they're moral problems where there is still a kind of grey area in some way. So, yeah, I don't expect the average listener of the story to care necessarily if my books are chewed up and spat out by an AI system to be represented in a way that I don't choose. With this, I feel like it's something that any right-thinking person ought to be concerned about, because effectively what it does is it weaponizes the ability to demean generally 51% of the population here and to try and cow them into silence by sexualizing them.
And Chris, just talk us through the regulation. Where does it stand at the moment? Is it illegal to be putting up pictures without people's consent of them in bikinis or near naked?
Yeah, so the law depends on where you are, and we have provisions within the Online Safety Act which suggest that in the UK, these would be classed as potentially illegal. We know that Ofcom is investigating this, Ofcom being, of course, the regulator that is in charge of enforcing the Online Safety Act. They have very serious questions that they are asking about this. In the United States, there is a law called the Take It Down Act, which is effectively requiring platforms to remove content that is non-consensual, sexualized images of people and to remove them within 48 hours or so. But the challenge really is the extent of who is to blame here. Is it the individual users that are using Grok to create these photos that are hugely distasteful and arguably illegal? Or is it the platform itself that is doing this? And this is where another bit of legislation comes in, which is Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which was updated in 1996. And this is really a core issue constantly, Manveen, with anything to do with technology, which is in the mid-1990s, tech companies saw ahead to what was going to happen with the internet and the World Wide Web. The fact that we were going to use these things to share with one another various bits of content and to interact online. And they said, we want nothing to do with being responsible for this. We want to be treated as a platform that simply passes through the content that our users create and to bear no responsibility for the actions of those users. And even in that word that we use to describe these things, platforms, we are effectively absolving them of any responsibility. So there is a live debate going on as to whether or not Section 230 is still fit for purpose in 2026, 30 years after it was first passed.
And it does feel like this tests that, because this isn't just a platform that is allowing people to put up pictures that they have generated. It's created the tool that is generating them. Doesn't it bear some responsibility?
Yes, because every other AI platform puts in guardrails to prevent this. The fundamental underlying technology that is used by Grok to create these images is no different to the technology that is in ChatGPT's DALL-E image generator. It's no different to the technology that underpins Google Gemini's Nano Banana image generator. Both of those platforms arguably have as strong, if not even stronger, image generation capabilities. They can create even more lifelike images than Grok. But there's a reason why Grok is being used here, which is those two platforms, if you try and get them to do this, will say, no, I won't.
Where do you see this ending? Will Grok have to change the way it functions and become more like other chatbots, or will they carry on as they are? I mean, where does this end?
Well, with Elon Musk, you never really know. And this is the challenge. This time, though, I do think this is different. And I think that the stakes are somewhat higher because, again, it comes back to that there is a clear right and wrong here for most people. It feels like there will be more of an impetus here and more of a groundswell of public opinion to say, well, actually, this isn't just a sort of culture war topic where you can have a viewpoint and perhaps we don't agree on that viewpoint, but I still respect the fact that you hold it.
There does seem to be real anger about it in Parliament. There is a push for more legislation. The Minister for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls has said that they might even ban Grok. Do you think that's likely to happen? Is it even possible?
It's possible, but then you can always get around it. One of the things that we have seen, particularly in the aftermath of the Online Safety Act, and its implementation and the age assurance that it put on various websites, including pornographic ones, is many, many people now know of the existence of VPNs, virtual private networks, which spoof your location so that you can be a UK internet user, but actually when you access what would be a banned platform in the case of Grok here through the UK, you can pretend you're in Bolivia or Bermuda or the Bahamas, and it will pretend that it was located there and show you the images anyway. So, I think it would be good to block this if there isn't any change. I think that it would be important to signal that this isn't acceptable. But I think ultimately, if people want to do this, they can do this.
But is it possible to force Grok to put in guardrails in a way that they've failed to so far?
If there was an international concerted effort where everybody said, well, you cannot operate in our country unless you do so, then yeah. But the problem that you have, and I spoke to various legal experts from my own reporting on this. One US legal academic was incredibly depressed about this because they basically said, well, we have all the legislation that we need in place to act against this. We don't need to pass any new laws. But we have a supine regulator in the United States and the Federal Trade Commission, which will be the one that oversees this. And we have a supine president in the United States who has shown he wants to protect big tech. So in theory, yes. But in practice, I think probably the biggest democracy in the world would hold out and say, well, I don't necessarily see the problem.
That was Chris Stokel-Walker, a tech journalist and the author of How AI Ate the World. And earlier you heard from Emma Yeomans, a news reporter at The Times, and Samantha Smith, a columnist at the Catholic Herald. The producers today were Sophie McNulty and Harry Stott. The executive producer was Tim Walklate, and sound design and theme composition were by Mal Lassetto. If you can, do leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.